History laid the foundation
that informs our conversation. Welcome to the classroom.
from the church to the streets and even in the suites and all around the world. I'm gonna keep it real in the classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom. Fannie Lou's classroom.
We're super excited to have you all back in the classroom with us on this week. We took a little break last week. We're back on this Thursday and happy to be here and live at noon. Of course, we will rebroadcast at 7 o'clock. Brooke, I'm hearing some feedback. Oh, that's me.
That's you. You're hearing yourself.
I'm hearing myself. All right. There we go. All right, welcome to the classroom. Just a little minor technical difficulties, not on Brooke's half, but on the hosts' half. So listen, we're excited to have you in the classroom on today. And of course, you know, we always try to have some amazing conversation and guests. And we always want to talk about issues where we have this intersection of race, theology, and politics. And so today's conversation is going to be amazing. I love the two sisters I have with me on today in the classroom. And so today we're going to talk about Black women thriving in hostile territory. We think it's an important conversation to always have. And we also do what we can to make sure we can continue to center the lives of Black women, particularly not just in this country, but what it means for us to see ourselves as part of a larger diaspora. We are part of the African diaspora, and how do we also see our struggles connected with our sisters around the globe? And so I'm super excited to have this conversation. But before we get started, I always have to shout out the team that makes this all possible. You know we got to shout out Brooke in the house, who is our audio engineer. She does a lot of hard work to get us up and going. So Brooke, thank you so much. And of course, y'all see who on the screen today. She was kind of off in the cut, but she's here. Shanika is here. And Cheryl's absence on today. She has some other business she has to handle on today. But we thank her for all of her hard work and making sure Fannie Lou's classroom is ready to go every Thursday. So thank you all to the amazing team that we have. I also want to remind you, though, it is early voting. So I want to make sure if you have not voted, make sure you go out and you vote in this election. All elections are important. Local elections matter, and we have about 14 amendments that you need to give attention to make sure you read those thoroughly and that you do vote and not just wait until the presidential election year. But we want to make sure that we are actively engaged in our local communities because we need your pothole fix, code enforcement, everything that deals with your individual neighborhood. You don't call the president, you call your local officials. So we want to make sure that we are engaged in local affairs. And, you know, as always, I want to talk about our Fannie Lou Hamer t-shirt, Fannie Lou's Classroom t-shirt that we have available for you to purchase. And when you purchase this, you help support this platform. You help us support, not the platform, but the podcast on the various platforms that we are on to try to get this information out to as many people as possible. And of course, the amazing guests that we have from week to week. You just help support this amazing program. So if you feel inclined, please go to friendshipwest.org, click on Justice, and you will see Fannie Lou's Classroom, and you will see a place where you can order your t-shirt. So thank you so much for your support. Now let's just jump right in. I want to first introduce our two guests that we have on today. First, we have Minister Kearra Haynes. Kearra is a recent graduate student of Divinity School at Vanderbilt. Her concentration is in chaplaincy and Black church studies. Her current research interests are bioethics, womanism, maternal health care, practical theology, research justice, and health policy. She currently serves as the secretary for Vanderbilt Divinity's Black Seminarians and interns for the Church Center at the United Nations with our dear sister that we continue to hold in prayer, Reverend Dion Boursier. She received her BS in health science with a minor in speech pathology from Marshall University, followed by a post-bachelor's degree certificate in radiology technology. Afterwards, she received her master's in health systems from Texas Women's University and leveraged her interdisciplinary background by working in community prevention and intervention as a contractor for the Texas Department of State of Health Infectious Diseases Branch. She was recently admitted into Vanderbilt School of Medicine Public Health Program Global Health Track. Her article, Will the Black Church Please Stand Up?, was published in the Reproductive and Economic Justice and Post-Roe Landscape, Changing the Conversation in Christian Communities Intervention Forum by Vanderbilt Divinity School. Kearra is a minister here at Friendship West, and she also faithfully serves in ministry here. She is currently part of the healthcare ministry, our gender justice team, and the Broughton Wells Center for Gender Justice here at Friendship West. Kearra is also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and she is one of my dear mentees. So let's welcome Minister Kearra Haynes to Fannie Lou's classroom. And then we have my dear sister, Reverend Doctor. I'm still saying, can I still say newly minted Doctor? Kamilah Hall Sharp. Reverend Sharp is a womanist preacher, professor, scholar, author, and community organizer. She is an ordained minister in Disciples of Christ Christian Church and currently serves as co-pastor of The Gathering, a womanist church here in Dallas, Texas. She is the director of the Doctor of Ministry and Public Ministry program and assistant professor of Hebrew Bible and public ministry at Chicago Theological Seminary. Her scholarship focuses on the intersection of race, gender, and class with the biblical text and contemporary culture. Reverend Kamilah is the co-author of The Gathering, a Womanist Church, Origins, Stories, Sermons, and Litanies, and is a contributor to the Bitter the Chastening Rod, Africana Biblical Interpretations After Stoning the Road We Trod in the Age of Black Lives Matter, Say Her Name, and Me Too, and Slavery's Long Shadow, Race and Reconciliation in American Christianity. Reverend Kamilah is also the board president for Faith in Texas. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Business Economics from Florida A&M University. She is a proud Rattler. And a Master of Divinity from Memphis Theological Seminary. And a Juris Doctorate. She's a doctor 2 times over from Indiana University, Bloomington, and a PhD in Biblical Interpretation Hebrew Bible from Bright Divinity School at Texas Christian University. Let's welcome again Reverend Kamilah Hall Sharp and Minister Kearra Haynes to Fannie Lou's classroom. So excited about this conversation today. So we're talking about Black women thriving in hostile territory. And I wanted to have this conversation also, not just what this hostile territory is, what's this terrain that we are constantly negotiating and navigating, but also what we do to thrive. And sister circles are part of that. Sisterhood is a big part of that. So we look at Ecclesiastes 4:9. It says, 2 people are better than one, for they can help each other succeed. And then after our namesake, Fannie Lou Hamer once said, there is one thing you have to learn about our movement. 3 people are better than no people. Come on. And so I like that, right? Because it's also this notion of you don't need a whole lot of people to go with you. Right? It's having the right 3 people to go with you, right? And if we were to layer that, right, it would be Thurman's 2 questions: where are you going and who's going with you? So it's always this idea of that we don't live this life alone. And that's very African-centered of us, right? That it takes a village, that we're not in this life alone. We're not we're individuals, but we're not individualistic, right? That we are very communal. So sisterhood, sister circles are something that's very important. So I want to maybe anchor this conversation in a recent experience I had in Salvador Bahia back in August. And I was able to, it started off as one who was sitting in the midst of women who clearly had a tight sister circle. But I was somewhat of, I felt like a spectator initially, right? For a number of reasons. Number one, I didn't speak the language. Right? So they were speaking in Portuguese. We had a translator, but it's not quite, there's still a little nuance there when someone's translating, right? And, I'm a gazillion thousand miles away from home. So I'm like, but instantly, as they started talking, we were like, oh, we are part of this circle. And they made us feel like we were part of that circle. And just to hear them talking about their craft, talking about the ways in which they pursue economic independence, the way they talked about their ancestry, right? They never did not have a Sankofa as a way of being, right? So in the conversation, they always went back to my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my mother did this, the way the tradition was passed on to them. And for them, the importance of carrying that tradition, but also doing it in a way that was 21st century, right? So it's this, I love how they understood we have to not throw away what's behind us, but how do we make it even relevant to where we are now? And so we're listening, and it started off, they're just talking about this is what we do, and then somewhere in the conversation, something shifted, and one of the ladies, now I don't speak Portuguese, but the way the lady was talking, her tone, her hand movements, she was clearly calling out another woman in the group, right? So at that point, and rightfully so, the translator stopped translating, which was fine with us, right? Because clearly there was some tension that was going on. And so eventually they were like, you can tell them what's going on, right? And so essentially what happened was one of the younger ladies, right, had an issue with she wasn't old, she was older than the younger lady. And she said, I wasn't going to come today because she talked about something she did to her that she didn't like and she was upset. She said, but I came anyway because I understand that what we have to do as sisters is bigger than this tension that I have with the sister sitting across from me, right? And so I was like, now that's what I'm talking about, right? It's like they trust one another to be able to talk about if I have an issue with you, right? It seemingly, I felt as if they didn't do I'm going to go tell Shanika about what Kamilah did to me, and she's going to go talk to Brooke, and everybody looking at Kamilah, right? I felt like they felt free enough, and they trusted each other enough to have that. And so the lady she had an alt with responded, and by the end, they both were crying, right? And they reconciled in that moment. And then you could tell they got some other stuff they got to work out, but I thought it was beautiful, right? And they did that in front of us with no shame and no regard for this is outside business. We were them. And I think for me, that was a powerful moment for me because just for me, in general, I always think about myself as being a global citizen, and particularly as a African in the diaspora. So I felt so much at home in that moment. And I said, now this is, and Reverend Dr. Irie was with us, and even she said, let's talk about how y'all see this sister circle. We were like, it was so powerful for us. And I was like, this is amazing. This is what it really looks and feels like. And to see it happen in real life and to see how the women responded. And the elders, I love how the elders sat back and they just observed. Now, the elder stepped in when she felt like, it was enough back and forth. Then she was like, let's move to a resolution. So I liked that because it wasn't like, let them go at it, let's take sides, and then we leave here and we still have fractions because like the young girl said, the work we have to do is so much larger and important that we have to be on the same page because they understood the white domination that was still taking place and trying to strip them of their language, their culture, practicing candomblé, there in Salvador Bahia, and also trying to take their business of selling a cartage, right, away from them by making it commercialized. So they understood that the outside forces were upon them and how do we have to stay together. So I wanted to share that just to talk about why sister circles are important because they are also navigating some hostile territory, even in Salvador Bahia. Even though they're the majority, there's still that undercurrent of white supremacy that is at work and that is threatening their livelihood. So
before you go on, because you know I ain't going to remember this in 5 minutes.
Yes, go ahead. Yes, just jump right in.
You said something the story itself, it sets up so many things that's so important. First of all, to be able for that sister to show up, even though she knew she had issues right there, she showed up as her authentic self, right? That's something I think we need to talk about.
Yes.
Important in being in sister circles is showing up as your authentic self. But to be open and honest enough to be like, we can have this conversation, mature enough, that's what I'm going to say. Yeah. Mature enough to have the conversation that it needs to be had. And I think that's something that's very important for our sister circles in order to sustain our sister circles too, because there's been the outside forces come in our issues, and that's what destroys our what's supposed to be our safe space.
Yes. Yes. Kearra, did you want to?
Yes. In addition to being mature enough, I believe that there is also something about for her to still show up, knowing that she was still going to have some kind of support from another sister. So that means that there has been some sort of trust that was instilled earlier on to say, I'm still going to come, regardless, in my authentic self, with my authentic truth as well. So it's some sort of trust that I think that probably was developed, but that's also needed within our sister circles as well.
Yes. So it was just powerful, right? And I think it shows the power of what it means to be your true self, right, and what it means to really be mature, right? And I felt like, and another thing that I found in that moment was, because I think sometimes we can think about, particularly I think in American context, if we're looking at we think it's just so irrelevant. Like, you can't be your authentic self and be relevant while still maintaining some things that are important in our past. That same code, like, grab that, go back and fetch that which is helpful, useful for our future. Because I was looking at some of them, and they were young. Some had went to university, right? But they came back to the business. And I could tell they took they're very current. I mean, they had you think about everywhere to take a payment, they had it. Right, and some of them, we went to some of the places up in the mountains, they still straight up shop, right? So it's almost like we're going to come, somebody would think, why would you go back there? Why wouldn't you stay in the city? Why wouldn't you go to Sao Paulo, Rio? They're like, no. We went to university, we learned, and we're back. And we're going to remain part of the business, and we're going to take what we learned in university to make sure we maintain this sense of culture. And I think another part of what I really realized with that sister circle does is help keeps intact self-identity, right? It helps you to really know who you are as a self, that you're able to have a differentiation of self that is very healthy, a high differentiation, right? Where you're clear about who you are, your thoughts, your attitudes, and your actions. The negative actions don't override those things. And I think that's what allowed them to come in that space. Like Kearra said too, like, I'm going to show up because I know I'm not going to get jumped on. I know I can say this openly. And I think to a degree, somewhere she must have felt a sense of connectedness and trust with us. She didn't know us, right? And I'm pretty sure they knew we were coming, that we were Americans coming to sit with them. We were all Black, but she knew she hadn't seen us before. We weren't dressed like them, right? That she felt like, I'm going to share this even with company. We weren't company. I guess maybe that's a better way of saying it. Like, we weren't in mixed company, how we normally say, right? Something we don't say, we know we in mixed company. And they felt, and I love that they felt comfortable enough to share, like, we can do this with you here too. And they trusted us to hold that and not judge.
Truth.
Yeah, to tell their truth. So one way that some people have coined this or given the description of sister circles is it's a sacred gathering of women connecting, sharing, celebrating life. It is a space to experience and embrace the nurturing energy of the feminine that resides within each and every one of us. It is a place to give and receive love and nurturing and to share wisdom through our stories. And so that's kind of a definition of sister circles that I want to lift up. But before we go into why they're necessary, I want to talk about what makes this territory, and I'm saying by America, the places where we live and have to move in and out and negotiate and navigate daily, what makes it hostile? So I want to ask, either one of you can go, but I want to hear from both of you. Because the name of this, we're talking about thriving in hostile territory, not just surviving. That Black women, we always find ways to not survive, but to thrive against, and most times against great odds. So let's talk about what makes this territory so hostile.
Kamilah, we can go first.
I'm telling you, you can go first. I'm trying to be kind over here. It's so many things,
right?
Because the hostility goes from the largest sense of the land itself, from us, being on this land, to all the way down to sometimes in our homes, right? So hostility, it comes from these systems that are set up or that were not set up for our survival, right? So we have hostility in our economic system. Because, we don't necessarily get paid the way we're supposed to get paid. We don't get jobs. There are so many things not only that, but, even when we are doing well, we have people who will come and attack us. And I'm thinking about the organization that was giving money to Black sisters in Atlanta, right? That type of stuff, right? So, even when we're trying to help ourselves or help each other, things like that. But hostility in the healthcare system. We know how Black women are dying at a higher rate than anybody else, but it's so many things. Like, it's not even just the Black women, it's our children, how they get diagnosed and misdiagnosed and misnutrition, and the things you have to fight for our children. It makes it that's still something you got to carry about. Of course, the judicial system, but also let's talk about if we're going to be honest, even in our religious spaces, right?
Yes,
There's hostility in
that's
our
right.
religious spaces
Right.
within these churches. And then you got to deal with white supremacy and microaggressions and all those things on a day-to-day as you show up to your job. And then sometimes you got to go home and deal with a whole nother level of hostility. And to me, it's so many levels of hostility for Black women. It's, all my life I had to fight, like she said, right? Like
Right.
each and every day you getting up and it's something you got to fight against. And so it's such a wide spread, but I'm going to let Kearra go.
I think that was a great layout for sure. And so speaking to how it's so layered, so it's understanding the intersectional and gender racism oppression that Black women are facing. And of course, we know that this is historical as well. So, and global, not just historical, but it's global, as all the time Reverend Dion would always say during the internship, what happens in the South of Dallas is happening in the South of the globe. Not just the South of America, it's happening at the South of the globe as well. So I think thinking about it intersectionally and thinking about all the social categorizations such as race and gender and class and how those are overlapping disadvantages. And then after that, you also have to think about, okay, the stress responses, you have the stressors, then think about the stress responses such as weathering, within the healthcare system that oftentimes is probably gaslighted or undiagnosed or overlooked oftentimes as well. So those are just a few, in addition to what Reverend Kamilah lifted up.
Yeah, because I think that's important, right? Because that's enough to make you, Marvin Gaye said, make you want to holler and throw up both your hands, right? And every day nevertheless, we get up and we go out here and we make it happen. And it's the fearless fun that you're referring to. And I think, so that is another example, right, of the way in which when we're doing it, we're making it happen. Let me back up. This is what I was just saying this yesterday to me and Pastor Magruder were having conversations, getting ready for a Bible study. And y'all know how it is. You start having these conversations, you go this way and because everything is so connected, right? To Kearra mentioned intersectionality. That's always at work. So some kind of way we went down the road of, the ways that, as Black women, as we try to do what we can to help one another out, and that how white supremacy is always finding a way to come inside. And I was telling him about, and I think Brittany Cooper talks about this in her text, this white aesthetic gaze on the Black woman's body, how highly visible we were during enslavement because we were a great commodity, not just in the field as land and labor, picking the cotton, chopping the tobacco, harvesting the rice, but the productivity and labor of birthing babies. Right. And how even in that moment, our Black maternal care was never a concern, and that continues to today. Right. You both talked about the systems. Here's talking about the healthcare system. And I was saying that white aesthetic gaze remains. And an example of that is the Fearless Fund. Now, Black women down here doing their thing, raising money, not asking you for it was asking you for the money. Then it would be y'all Black women lazy, you're trifling, you're always looking for a handout. Now, these Black women doing their thing, getting that money and helping other Black women get money who can't go to a Chase, a Bank of America, a Wells Fargo, and get money to fund their business. And then for the court to temporarily block their ability to help a Black woman thrive in business and hostile territory, right? It is always in front of us. And I think in many ways, so I want to talk about, so let's get into the importance of sister circles in this moment, because I think we kind of get a good sense that where you look, it's hostile, whether it's healthcare system, whether it's the economic system, right? Pay equity. We don't even get equal pay with white women.
Not even. Right?
So every instant, that's the point, right? The hostility is like every negative category, we're at the top. And when you look at statistics, but yet and still, right? We can look at you and Reverend Dr. Irie Session at the gathering, right? How the ways that you all was like, you know what? Going about church, right?
Right.
You know what? We're going to go over here. We're not going to do church without sanctuary. We're going to build our own sanctuary and do church, right? So we always know how to adapt. We're highly adaptive. We're like, you throw us this, no problem. We're going to make it work over here.
And we know how to create.
And that's in our DNA is what I'm saying, right? It's in our DNA. And to Kearra's point, when you go to various places and see whether you're in Ghana, even the Congo, South Africa, South America, and I even say Black spaces in London. Yep. This is what we do. And we are connected. Same issues. If you close your eyes, if it wasn't for the various accents, you would think I'm in South Dallas having this conversation. So I think sister circles are not just, how do we think about them in ways that not just who I know, like me, you, Kearra, in this circle, but how can we even think about expanding that to say my sister is also, I left my sisters back in Bahia, for example, right? How do we continue to make these connections and not run away from not seeing ourselves as being part of a larger diaspora? Like, what does it look like to have a global sister circle and give attention to those things? Do we think about our sisters over in Palestine in the moment? Mm-hmm. Particularly Black Christians that are in Palestine who are being impacted by war, et cetera. Like, do we find ways to center their lived experience in the places where we have privilege to do so? Like this platform, for example, right, to do that. So let's talk about, we kind of talked about this, but let me hear from your own points of view. What's the importance of a sister circle, especially as it relates to, this question is Black women in the U.S., let's say that, and let's tag on to that, and beyond these political borders. She's pointing at you, Kearra.
Yes, ma'am. I listen to my elders. Okay. For me, the purpose and the significance of sister circles, one, I think it's that linchpin for us, the same way the Black church is. But also I think it's to belong, to connect, to charge and to be recharged as well, to support, to have that sense of security that we know we don't have in the U.S. Mm-hmm. And I think that sense of security is through understanding our shared experiences. And it is through the sharing of stories where we understand we are our own credible research. And oftentimes we don't find that in America, where we feel our stories are validated or legitimized. No, we validate each other through our stories and through our existence.
Absolutely. Everything Kearra just said, but I think it's very important because we have to have, because we're in this so many spaces are hostile. We have to have some space that's not. Right?
Yes,
a safe where you can be a space where you can be safe, a space where you can be your full self, be vulnerable, and be honest, but also where you can find space to heal. Mm-hmm. Because that's the other part about this. Mm-hmm. It's like, we can't get rid of these systems until we kind of heal ourselves. And it's hard to heal when you're being attacked every day, right? So you have to have some type of space where you can get healing, but you can also know that you loved, right?
Yes.
So when I talk to my sister circle, there are certain things, whether it's I'm having the worst day of my life because everything is not going right, or if it's I know they behind me, right? Mm-hmm. I know, they going to give me, but also when I just don't have the answers. It's the collective wisdom. It's the understanding that there is so much more that we don't have in our individual lives and our individual experiences. Like she said, it's the drawing on of each other's stories. Like, oh yeah, that happened to me, or something like that, and this is what I did. Or of course, going back, like you was talking about, reaching back to things that we've done in the past and things like that. And so I think those are all parts that's important. But having the circle has to be intentional. Right. The created, whether it's here or whether we're talking about on a global level, we have to be intentional to have these, to create and make these spaces so that women have, for me, that was the whole reason that we started the gathering, right? Mm-hmm. We started the gathering to make sure there was a space for womanist preachers to preach in Texas.
Right.
Because there was none, right? And so it's how do we consistently be able to create space, but hold each other's truth in that space, to build that type of relationship.
Yeah, and it sounds like, if I hear both of you correctly, sister circles and storytelling in and of itself becomes a mechanism for liberation and healing. Mm-hmm. And because we do all that, I don't care what anybody says, because I've never subscribed to the superwoman trope anyway, strong Black woman trope. I never subscribed to that, and I think we also have to make sure we continue to push back against that, because that would allow people to think that we can't cry, that we can't hurt, that we can't rest, and that you can work us like mules, right?
And then when we did, get another one.
And get another one. Right. So I appreciate that. And I like that is a definite function, right, of sister circles is for us to have a safe place to land, to your point, where people can hold our truth, where I can be myself, no judgment zone, and to pull on collective wisdom. All these things are so African centered, right? Yeah. And so which lends itself to how we're pulling on already African ways of knowing and not naming it, but that's what we're doing.
The storytelling itself.
Exactly. The griot, right? Who's yeah. So that oral tradition of passing stories along in the hopes that these stories help generations to come, right? That some kind of way, how are we passing this on to the next, and the younger women who are coming behind us.
And that's what's important. You usually are always real big on, the intergenerational, right? And so I think that's the other thing that's really important as we talk about creating spaces, right? It can't just be all the people who, all of us the same, right?
Right.
You have to have some other generations.
That's
because, and I don't know, have you, Ebony Janice, All the Black Girls Are Activists, her new book. Yes. She talks about a conversation she finally had with one of her aunts, right, about certain things. But, other aunts weren't ready to have these type of real conversations. So what is it like for us to be real, to bring in younger generations and things like that, and have these real conversations that we know it's stuff we going through,
right,
or stuff we done been through. It might not be the stuff we want to talk about in front of everybody,
right,
but it's stuff we going through, and we need to have these conversations.
Yeah. I think, and it reminds me of, I guess it was last year, we did a conversation. I moderated a conversation with definitely. It was a transgenerational conversation. I'm thinking about the ages. We had a Gen Zer, millennials. I'm Gen X. We didn't. I think it was just Gen Z, millennial, and Gen X, and we had the conversation on a Wednesday night.
Yes.
Yes, yes. And what I remember distinctly about that, though, was that, and Kearra, if you remember, you can help me remember this. They all said, "I'm looking for a sister circle."
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
So and so that struck me, right? Because I was like, well, wow. Because you can assume that everybody's connected. And I'm looking at the young ladies on the panel. I know they're very active. They're very much in community. And I'm just like, wow. And I think that's what's so important of how we more intentional about not only having sister circles, but bringing sisters into the circle.
But we also got to address the lack of trust that sisters have for each other, right?
Yes.
So, and that's a historical thing. If we even go back to slavery, how that was set up for us to be pitted against each other.
Yes,
and so I've had this experience with sisters, talking and teaching stuff and just talking about the hurt that they've had in situations, right? And so never being able to get over how a sister has hurt them, and never having the space like you had in Bahia to let's really talk about this, or not being mature enough to let's have this conversation. And so there are certain that are very guarded about coming into, who don't trust women. And I mean, I all jokes aside, growing up, like most of my friends was boys when I was really younger, right? I hung out with more boys because girls seem to just be too much, right? Not too. I ain't gonna say too much, but they were a little catty sometimes, and like I didn't have that kind of drama with boys. But to the same thing today, you have a lot of sisters who are just not able, who don't feel safe. And so, how do we create spaces where a sister feels like she can show up?
Yes, true that, and some of that has to be resolving the issues. We can't also come in and make pretend.
Yeah, because some of that is, we need to go do some work on ourselves too, right?
That part.
And we skip over that a lot. Like you can't show up to the space and bleed on everybody. Like,
right.
We can share, but you do got to do some stuff at home, or in therapy.
Or if you show up and you're bleeding and we say, sis, let's talk about this. Are you open enough? Because sometimes we're not open to receiving that we don't think we bleeding on everybody. Is everybody else bleeding on me?
We need to check our posture.
Come on.
Check your posture.
Check your posture. Kearra, did you want to say something?
There was a moment, and it was my first year. I think it was 2018 at Sammy DeWitt Proctor conference that Mama Regina took to. And I remember it was my first year, so I was just being exposed to everything, loving it, soaking it all up. And I remember there was a pajama party at, I think, on a Friday or Saturday night. It was probably a Saturday night. And I remember seeing a woman with red hair. It ended up being Dr. Iris Sessions that I seen years later. But Dr. Melva Sampson, Dr. Benita Weems, Dr. Gabby, Dr. Tracy, her daughter. And we were all either listening or to them sharing personal stories, the shedding of tears, openness, honesty. And that was the first time, I think in a long time, that I had heard truths of Black women being able to be honest with one another, consoling one another, but I also found it to be a healing space. And I was like, oh my God, I have never, until this day, I was like, how can that space still be here for in a generational space too? With Gen Z, with millennials, Gen X, how can we create that space? On like a Saturday night, it was called a pajama party. I'm sure it was termed something else as well, but I remember at the end, it was a pajama party and I didn't know what it was, but I remember the first 5 or 6 minutes, we were all in a circle too. And I remember after the first 5 or 6 minutes, I remember Dr. Melva Sampson, of course, it was a play on words on checking what's in your refrigerator. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can relate to this. This sharing of her story, I can relate to this. Need to make sure I check what's in my, is it expired? And I was like, oh my goodness, just hearing from a woman, not just of that caliber, but also of a woman who's able to give her truth and then also be open and honest about it, to know she's also going to be hugged and protected spiritually afterward. I love that moment so much, but that's also what I'm also hearing as you all speak about being able to hold your truths, and how also can you know that you'll be protected when you share that truth as well.
And that goes back. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I've seen, I'm glad you brought that up, because at Proctor, I've seen quite a few of these sister circles.
That's right.
Proctor, very impromptu. It's not necessarily, but the sharing of stories, and it's always a very transformative thing for us, particularly because we always have seminarians or younger people coming in. So it usually is but that's something that needs to be done more often, right?
For sure, yes.
But the other thing is, when we come to our circles, is we got to listen sometimes. Because sometimes we want to be the only ones talking, and you know what I mean? But sometimes we really do need to listen, because it's what we're hearing from others that's going to help us.
That's right. And so since Kearra brought up Proctor, I would say Proctor is an example of what it means, because you can only do that at Proctor because you know Proctor is safe enough for you to do that.
And you know the people who
are going to be in. So it's almost as if you have a larger village circle, right? And the women now saying, we're going to kind of go in here and even make this a sister circle. And to your point, and that's just Proctor, right? It's always something impromptu coming up at Proctor, because people feel it's a safe space to move off to the corner to do this, because we know you're going to be loved and affirmed at Proctor, right? And so I was going to go ahead and give Proctor a shout out for us being able to be that space for us to come and to be.
Because I'm like, Kearra was one of the best examples of a circle like that was at Proctor.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how I didn't know about the pajama party.
I didn't get it. You didn't get invited.
I didn't get invited. I'm trying to figure out how I missed that.
And you know what? It's so interesting, because I remember Miss Reed said, "Go on, baby. I promise you, just go out there and be exposed." And it was the first time I heard of even millennial womanism, before womanism. But I remember not knowing. I saw a woman in purple. It said "Ray of Hope," and I was like, "Why?" We're listening to her story. I was like, why are we all just, sitting? Why are we all sharing? But she sort of opened it up to where she was saying, this is my story first. And of course she shared, as far as family and everything like that. And I did not know the woman's name or anything. Obviously I know now it's Dr. Benita Weems, but I didn't know anything about her. And I remember doing so much research on all the women afterwards. But I was just like, I want to be with
I'm sure you did. Right. These the real people.
I was like, I don't see a lot of my age group in here except for Reverend Gabby. Of course, I did my research and now I love her so much now. But I was like, I want to be with women like this afterward. And of course, now in Texas, and I love being, of course, at the gathering, being a ministry partner at the gathering, and of course, Friendship West. But even when it comes to developing like the women's ministry here and letting it be intergenerational, what is needed? What are some of the components, that are needed when it comes to sharing those open, vulnerable spaces, but also listening, because ageism can also be a factor too. So
yeah,
good point. Because the other thing I was thinking about that is, like, if we having these conversations, like the older people got to be honest, right?
You're right.
We got to be real honest about who we are, who we've been, and who we are.
Because that's who we been is what's always missing.
Right? Because we acting like who we are now is who we
Right,
always
it's
been,
been.
right? And it's not. And so I think that will be very helpful to others, because that we got this. You got this look that this is how. Well, let me tell you, back in the day, it wasn't like this, right?
That's right.
And how could that really open up the space and open up other people to feel safe to tell they real truth,
right?
And that's an example of going back and getting like back in the day.
That's right. And I think what it does, it frees up some younger person sitting there thinking, I'm different, I'm out here on the edge. You're like, oh well, no, oh you were like that when you were younger too. Like stories also helps us see ourselves too. And that's why it's important. So sister circles do that. So we covered so sister circles are good for our own mental, emotional, and psychological well-being. But sister circles are also not new. What, 150, 200 years old, right? You think about women's clubs, et cetera. So also a function of sister circles have been places where we come and sit to strategize, to conscious raise, right? What is happening, how we give attention to that, how we strategize for surviving and thriving. And I'm thinking about, of course, my girl Ada Bell Wells Barnett, who was who led a social club where when they met for high tea, people thought they were mimicking the European women, but they were raising money for the movement. Right. Like very race conscious. So it's also that they're also used in that space. So Ken, let's talk a bit about how are we doing? Do you see us doing that in this moment? And if not, what's the way forward? How do we also see these circles? And it could be another circle, right? Maybe this sister circle is for us to come, to sit, share our truths, to get that love, to get that wisdom, but then we also understand sister circles can function in another capacity. And so we're coming over here for this sister circle is designed to do X, Y, and Z, to deal with those very issues, this hostility that we face. We have to address that not as individuals or not as this one organization, because one organization here and there, one individual can never beat this system in these institutions. So let's talk about, do we have those type of circles set up? And we still have the National Council of Negro Women, obviously, which is what I'm calling a sister circle of sister circles, right? It's organizations of organizations. But do we have that? And do we need it?
Do we have it? You were saying something?
Kearra?
Were you saying something?
I was just pointing at her. I was thinking.
Oh.
But I'm Kamilah.
Do we have it? I think not in the way that we need it.
Okay.
I think there are spaces out there, there are sisters. Because to me, even that Fearless Fund, right?
Yes.
That's a sister circle that was doing some things
right.
in a certain way. And I know that there are sister circles who may not be as big, but who are moving things around, right? Mm-hmm. But as we think about the interconnectedness of those who are out, not just on this continent, but in other places and stuff like that.
Right.
I don't know that we have a strong circle, a big enough circle like that right now. I think it's needed. Mm-hmm. I think we need even more circles, like just right here in Dallas. Don't get me wrong, we got our circles, right?
Right.
But we need more circles.
Right.
We need bigger circles.
Bigger circles, right.
And I think, to me, that's where I'm in. I think we need. I think for so many of us, our circle has been for us to survive.
Right.
Like, how can I just make it, right? Like, can y'all help me get through this? And, some of us, we can move past this. We could do, we could plan a few things and stuff like that. But I think our circles have to get bigger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Kearra, were you going to say something else?
I was going to say, I think that there are circles out there. And I'm just thinking about locally, obviously back in Dallas. Are the real needs being met? And I think I'm thinking about transparency in what we started out with. Are we really transparent about what those needs are in order for us to meet? Because sometimes they're in hushed tones to where it is maybe only 2 and 3, when really it's a lot more women experiencing that lack in which we really need. So I'm wondering are we really transparent with what those needs are in order to gather?
Yeah, that's important too. And then it's this larger sense of we know what we need to be tackling and addressing, right? So what does it mean to have a women's club centered on Black maternal health? I'm not saying we have various organizations, but I'm talking about collective efforts where it's just a major circle where we're all targeting this issue that we're up against and primarily dealing with policy and bringing down structures and institutions. And that takes not the isolated work and maybe you bring me in to talk or do this, or we have this event, you come support. It's about how do we get this larger group together and have a real like Black maternal health policy that we all work collectively to do. So it's one of the things we're going to attempt to do in 2024 around Black maternal health is bring all of us to the table and say, well, during, Black maternal health week, instead of having 5-6 different events, how do we collectively come together and show this power that we're trying to build, right? This collective solidarity power is what's needed. And I think that's a way of having this, when I'm thinking about sister circles as we understood them as women's clubs, back in the day, how they like back then they knew we need equality, right? We're trying to get freed up from, not being able to vote, having public accommodate. Like the target was clear, and I know to maybe Kearra's point too. Like sometimes that target is not as clear now, and some of that has to do because we have moved away from community.
That part.
So we're highly individualistic, and that never works well for us.
But even I want to come back to what she said earlier too was. The hushed tones, like part of the not being clear, because this is an individual which turns into a community problem, is we're not honest about what we really need.
What we need.
Out of shame, out of whatever it may be, we have needs and we won't say it, right? Even with your closest friends, like, I'm all right. Sometimes we do I'm all right, but we really ain't all right, right? We won't say, or people offering us, and we won't even take the help, right? But because we can't even say what we need, like I need childcare, right? Now it's a bigger issue. It's actually bigger than me, but because, like she said, we can't even be honest about it, or we won't be honest about whatever the issue is. And because I think if we were really to share our whole truths, we can find those targets, because we got, like you said, it's all connected. It's all connected. I'm not the only one dealing with this. I might be the only one dealing with it right now.
No. Right.
But I'm not the only one dealing with it.
So I think it's the hushed tones and turn of guilt and shame in some of it, though. And this is what I experienced just in doing this work every day on the front line. Sometimes it's not even guilt, shame, and trying not to let somebody know. It is, I'm only concerned when it impacts me directly.
That part too.
So part of this is also we got to get outside of that, because, that's like me eating 3 meals a day and saying, what you mean, Shanika, hungry? I ate today. So it's food out there, right? And we have to get out of that. So I think it's both and, right? I think it's one, it's sometimes it's that, and then sometimes we just so highly, and that's what I'm about, individualism doesn't work for us.
And that goes to our classism.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And classism don't work for us either. We just ain't realized it.
Right. Well, hello. But you do when you come tell us we need some help, because out here in this gated community, they done told us they don't put this cross on our yard. You know what I mean? And Sneaky can tell you, like, so many people call us with issues and need help, and I'm just like, if I take everything that people send us, if we all got together, we wouldn't have a need to do these individual pieces. No, this criminal justice system is impacting all of us. So how do we get on the front end of some of these things that can hopefully, stave off or intercede before we get to the point where we all these individuals, help me with this. Well, now this is our collective problem. Now let's all do this together. And the problem is when we have these conversations trying to gather, people don't come.
That part. You still don't want to tell it?
And then when it happens
but 3 people is better than no people. Ain't
Listen, I'll take
I'll
take 3 good people right now.
I always tell people, I be like, Jesus didn't have a whole, but he did not. It was not the whole. Everybody wasn't following Jesus.
Did not.
Everybody wasn't following King, even though they act like it now. But
right.
It was a whole bunch of churches that didn't really rock with him.
That's right. And so let's shift there, because we are having this conversation at Fannie Lou's classroom, who was who was a devoted Christian, well-developed theology, right? But she was clear about what it meant to follow Christ. Like she said, I'm out there in the street because that's where Christ was, where it was happening. Like she understood Jesus and justice, right? So let's talk about what's the role of, I have a question here that's centered, I want to get it right because I want to make sure we talk about this specifically as a church, right? So what is the role of the church And I'll say, we can say other culturally based institutions play in not only formalizing, realizing, and supporting with resources sister circles.
You just said the word right there. A resource. Can you resource? Put some money behind.
So the role of the church in us understanding that even today, Black women are still the backbone of the Black church. So let's talk about that in a few moments that we have.
Go first, Kearra. I'm going to let you go first.
Of course. So we know since the time of slavery, of us being enslaved through the civil rights movement, 1950s, 1960s, to civic participation, local organization, 1990s, even till today. Black church has been, still is, and I believe always will be the central institution in the Black community. At the organizational level, the Black church throughout the 20th century, of course, promoted education, business, political activism within, of course, the Black community, and even more contributed to a lot of our structures, our organizational structures and social networks. So it's a cultural role. It's a very dominant and significant cultural role in the Black community. And particularly, I know for me, when it comes to health, this is where health promotion comes in for me. Main way in which I understand how we understand body, mind, and spirits as well. And so this is where we also, when it comes to health promotion, us understanding our mental well-being, from Hush Harbors to where we understood our faith, to where we understood our identity, to where we understood, regardless if no one else on this plantation besides those who are also in this field with me, if no one else understands, it's going to be our God and us together. So it's us understanding where exactly our help comes from, our understanding of being comes from, but then also when it comes to that assurance and insurance of caring for one another, in which the Black church has been for us.
Yeah. I like what Kearra said. I'm going to add that, the Black church has always been there. But the thing is, it's been the Black woman
right.
who didn't always had the Black church to be able to be there, right? And
yes.
they have not always, have
That's
historically and even in contemporary times not supported Black women. Now, we don't mind working Black women. We don't mind working them. I mean, like, I need you to bake, I need you to cook, I need you to do all the things, right? But we don't want to pay Black women, for one. But not only that, we glorify the women who work the most, right? I went to a funeral, and this right here bothered me. So this lady literally, she had a heart attack. She had a heart attack, and as the people got up at the church and they talking at her funeral, she was on every single thing they had in that church. When you name it, she did it. The ushers, the this, the this, the this. But then one lady gets up and she's talking about how this lady, they do a women's tea every year. She's like, and she would make our flowers for us. And, she did it a couple years. And so one year she said, okay, I don't want to do it no more. Y'all got to get somebody else. She came back to it the next year and asked her again. And she did it again. And I mean, like, but the way they keep I was like, y'all killed this woman and you going to glorify it at her funeral.
That's real talk, though.
And that's what we do in churches. So what can churches do? They can stop killing Black women.
That's the first thing.
That's the first thing. Stop glorifying, because we do. Have you ever? I've been in churches before, and you have Sister so and so stand up and she do this and she do, and we talk about how wonderful she is. But ain't nobody worried about it. If she got any rest.
Right.
Ain't nobody worried about her mental health, her body, none of that.
Right.
So we need to stop killing Black women. We need to be serious about letting people rest and their mental health. For one, and then, like you said, resources. Stop asking Black women to do all this stuff and then don't pay them nothing. Mm-hmm. That's just not right. Especially when I've seen what certain churches pay males.
Bloop, bloop.
But the check you write out to the woman, it don't look nothing like that. Mm-hmm. Or I've even seen, I've even heard, I've never seen this, but somebody told me, smaller churches, they done gave them some flowers. That's nice.
That's nice.
And I still got to eat this week.
And I might need to go get me a massage. Or I might want whatever I want to do.
Whatever.
Right? Whatever's going to alleviate whatever concern I have, whatever that might be. And I think, and thank you for saying that, because well, first let me say this: at Friendship West Baptist Church,
make it clear,
under the leadership of the Reverend Dr. Douglas Haynes III, like he's serious about that, right?
Yeah,
The pay equity, he is serious about that, and he don't believe working us to death, right?
And
We're a bit. Don't get me wrong, we busy. But the needs are so great, and generous around holiday time. He gives us time off that otherwise you would have to use vacation for. So I feel like Dr. Haynes is very conscious of making sure that his staff, we get what we need. And in turn, I know for me, I try to, and even our ministries, I try to work folks to death, but sometimes only the same 4 people keep.
And that's what happened, because it's them 3, right? But even with them 3, you recognize, okay, like take a break, right? But what does it look like for in our churches to model?
Right.
Like, like you said, taking time out, because the reality of it is we're in a capitalist system that will grind you to death.
That's right. And it's about production and productivity. And that's what it's driven by. And we can't mimic that in the church. Exactly. And to your point, not only do we glorify Black women down, we talk, they did all. Then you would know any one person shouldn't be doing all that. But it's also, how do we as Black women not feel guilty about saying, no, I'm not. Don't ask me about them flowers again.
That part. Because here's my thing.
So
Black women, and sister circle, sisters, period. Let's talk about boundaries.
Yes.
Let's talk about how we set up boundaries so that folks won't kill it. Everybody in my church, they know I'm going to say it. And Kearra, I'm not going to let y'all kill me.
Right.
And when I say y'all, that's the church, the academy, and my family.
Period. No, right. That's for everybody.
And the sister circle needs to support, not letting nobody kill us.
And then is that not redemptive self-love, right?
I don't know what
I'm going to do all this, but you ain't going to kill me in the process. Or traditional communalism, right? Like, I'm going to make sure community is well taken care of, that everybody can thrive. But now if that means I won't, then we're not doing it. Right, and I think we have to get to that too. So it's also do y'all realize how you are killing the people? But also for women, the answer is no.
Yeah,
it's gonna be no tomorrow.
Sentence. And it's a complete
sentence.
Right,
and so I wish that sister would have felt like, not if I say no, what they gonna think? I don't care.
But let's talk about how people have been theologized to think that if you only doing it's
true.
only what you're doing for the Lord, or all this work you do, you ain't gonna make it to heaven if you don't do all of this. Wait a minute now.
Right. No, you're right. Yes. And she can tell you something. I'm like, we need a break. I'm like, just take off. Let's just don't work Friday. Because here it is. If I'm not mentally strong enough, or I don't have the mental capacity,
what are you doing?
I'm gonna either miss something important. I'm gonna miss a step in the process, and it's gonna cause a bigger issue. So it may be better for me just to woosah for the day, come back the next day, and get going again. And we just have to do that. We have to be very, especially
rest is resistance.
It is, and in church circles,
in that ministry.
Yes. Before they talked about nap ministry, Danielle was already on nap ministry. Okay. I was on nap ministry years because I believe in it. It helps me.
It does.
I'm back. I'm like, let's go.
Because like 20 minutes, and people like 20 minutes can make
a difference.
Like, I can make it now.
That's right.
I was like, putting a couch in my office was the best thing I ever did.
Now, I wouldn't do that, because for me, I wouldn't know how. It would be a nap.
You gotta know how to get up.
You're right. Exactly.
Boundaries with yourself.
Get up.
That's the other part. Boundaries with yourself.
Listen, we have to do a part 2 of this. We didn't get through half of the questions, but this is just designed to be organic. Let's just talk about real issues and, what we want to give attention to. And I like hearing from other people about what that means. So we're going to have to do a part 2 and have you all back in the place. And hopefully I want to bring Dr. Melva Sampson to the space. She wasn't able to make it today this time around, but I want to try to bring her into this space as well, because I think it's so much we can learn from each other. And learn that sister circles don't have to look the same everywhere, right? There's also not one way of doing that. And I want to explore that a little bit more about how they can look different in different spaces. It's designed to meet your needs in your circle. But the goal is have one, right? And it's what works for you. And then, of course,
if you don't have one, start thinking about how you can create one.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So I want to do that. And then I want to broaden that around. That's how do we intentionally create sister circles to really deal with systems and institutions. Because that is also a very rich legacy that our foremothers have left us as well. So let's give it up for Reverend Dr. Kamilah Hall Sharp and for Minister Kearra Haynes. Thank you all for being in Fannie's classroom today. Then we get like the church. We have a couple of announcements. We have a few things just to keep you mindful of. Next week, I'm super excited. about next week's episode. We're going to have our able-bodied executive pastor, Dr. David Malcolm Magruder, with us on next week for Fannie Lou's Classroom. And we're going to talk about a perspective, religion, politics, and the future of Black America. We're going to talk about what can be an agenda, a shared agenda we can have going into the presidential election year with Pastor Magruder. It should be a really good, lively conversation on next week. And then we want to remind you that we have the Fall Faith and Family Festival that we have every year at Friendship West. It's open to the entire community. It's not just for Friendship West. And we would love for you to join us from 12 to 3 this Sunday for Trunk or Treat. We'll have games, costume contests, dancing, and giveaways this Sunday, October 29th. I already mentioned the early voting is going on. Make sure you go out and vote. And then at Friendship West, we're bringing back the Howard Thurman Bible Institute. This is a way for you to really engage and take control of your own spiritual formation. As a church, we're responsible for assisting you with that. And this is one of the ways that we're going to assist you with developing your spiritual formation with the Howard Thurman Bible Institute. You can register today on our website, friendshipwest.org. It is free. The deadline is November 6th to register. And it's going to take place through November 6th to November 8th, every night, Monday through Wednesday, from 6:30 to 8:30. I think at around 6 o'clock is a light dinner snack. 6:30 before we go into our sessions. And then lastly, some of you have been incredible about supporting our iCare initiative. As you know, iCare initiative is to support the most vulnerable students in the Dallas Independent School District. We started with McShane Elementary School that had the highest level of impoverishment among our children in the DISD district. So we started with McShane about 4 years ago. Everybody has been wonderful in supporting that cause. Do we have our flyer for iCare? Okay, so you can go to friendshipwest.org and you will see that you can donate, but we also have a way of you getting a list of items that not only McShane needs, but we also added Haynes Global Preparatory Academy that's named after our pastor and sits on the campus of Paul Quinn. The students at both campuses have a lot of needs, and so we have a full list that you can access where you can buy those items, have them shipped to the church, or you can drop them off on Sundays between now and the end of November. And you can see us also this Sunday after worship experience to get that list and to make a financial contributions to iCare. But you can do the financial contribution at any moment by going to friendshipwest.org. So thank you for being with us in the classroom on this Thursday. We look forward to seeing you next week, 12 o'clock noon. Rebroadcast of this episode will take place at 7 o'clock p.m. We look forward to seeing you next week in the classroom.
From the church house.